A prejudiced bank employee mistreated a black couple during an important transaction. Just minutes later, she stood frozen in horror as a gun was pointed directly at her head. The very people she had judged moments before leaped in to save her life. How will this near-death experience change her? And will she find redemption after the terror she faced? Stay tuned to find out. But first, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love stories about transformation and second chances, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Amanda, a bank employee at a large branch of a prestigious bank, had worked there for many years. She was known for being quick and efficient at her job, but was equally famous for her cold, judgmental attitude. While she always completed her work on time and ensured customers were served, Amanda often treated those she deemed unworthy or unfit for the upscale environment of her bank with disdain. One busy morning, Marcus and Alicia, a black couple, walked into the bank. They were dressed smartly, with Marcus in a tailored suit and Alicia in a classy dress. The couple entered the branch confidently, clearly prepared for a significant transaction. But upon seeing them, Amanda's expression subtly shifted. Her eyes briefly flickered with an underlying hint of disdain. Without saying a word, Amanda had already formed an implicit bias based solely on their appearance. "Hello, I'm Marcus. We have a scheduled appointment for a large transaction," Marcus said politely, with a slight smile on his face. Amanda responded with a stiff smile, lacking the warmth she typically showed to clients she considered more important. "Please wait at the counter over there," she said, pointing them to a far corner of the bank, an area that was less visible, less comfortable, and far less luxurious than the main counters near the entrance. Sensing the injustice, Alicia politely asked, "Could we sit at the window counter? That spot seems more convenient for our transaction." Amanda maintained her rigid smile, replying with a soft yet somewhat irritated tone, "I'm sorry, but that counter is reserved." Without checking any information, she simply wanted to avoid serving this couple in the premium section of the branch. Marcus and Alicia could sense the unfair treatment, but chose to remain silent. They knew that even if they pressed the issue, Amanda's attitude would remain unchanged. Amanda didn't give the couple much thought. To her, they were just ordinary customers, not worthy of special attention. What she didn't know was that soon, these very people she looked down upon would change her life forever. As Marcus and Alicia sat in the section Amanda had directed them to, they immediately realized it wasn't appropriate for their important transaction. This branch was known for its luxury, with spacious, clean, and elegantly decorated transaction areas. However, the spot they had been given was far from the main counters, next to the restroom entrance and near the bank's maintenance area. It was a stark contrast to the neat, bright tables and attentive service other customers were receiving up front. Alicia couldn't hide her frustration. She looked around, her eyes glancing at other customers, mostly white, who were being warmly welcomed. These customers were seated in spacious, comfortable areas with beautiful counters adorned with art, stylish plants, and natural light streaming through large windows. The stark contrast made her feel insulted. "Do you see this?" Alicia muttered under her breath to Marcus, her tone tinged with annoyance. "They've sat us here while the front is completely empty." Marcus frowned slightly, but maintained his calm demeanor. "I know," he replied softly. "But let's just get this done quickly, and not let it ruin our day." Alicia glanced at Marcus but couldn't suppress her irritation. She understood that Marcus wanted to stay calm and avoid escalating the situation, but the disparity in how they were being treated was something she couldn't overlook. She sat down, her eyes still fixed on the front counters, where Amanda was cheerfully chatting with other customers, her smile much brighter and friendlier than the coldness she had shown them. When Amanda finally came to the counter where Marcus and Alicia were sitting, her attitude hadn't changed. She didn't greet them as she did other customers, simply handing them the necessary forms to fill out without any detailed explanation. Her handling of the paperwork was indifferent and rushed, clearly showing that she wanted to get this over with as quickly as possible. She didn't ask if they needed any further assistance, and when Alicia requested clarification on certain terms of the transaction, Amanda responded with a mechanical nod, making no effort to provide additional help. Alicia felt her frustration mounting. She tried to remain calm, but Amanda's attitude was infuriating. "We want to make sure everything is in line with the terms we agreed upon," Alicia said, trying to maintain a professional tone, though her irritation was evident. Amanda didn't respond verbally, instead shoving the documents toward them with a blank stare. "Everything's right here," she said curtly. Marcus sensed the tension rising, gently placing a hand on Alicia's arm in an attempt to defuse the situation. "Let's just finish this transaction and get out of here," he whispered, trying to remain calm. Despite Marcus's attempt to stay composed, Alicia's irritation hadn't lessened. She was not only angry about Amanda's lack of respect, but also deeply troubled by the blatant unfairness they were experiencing. She glanced around the room again, noticing how the other customers, those Amanda was meticulously attending to, were being treated entirely differently. These customers didn't have to wait long for assistance. They were greeted with smiles and given the meticulous care that Alicia and Marcus were being denied. Once the transaction was underway, Amanda continued to treat them with indifference and coldness. She barely made eye contact with Marcus or Alicia while handling the paperwork, going through the motions as quickly as possible, unconcerned with their satisfaction. When Alicia asked for more details about the transaction, Amanda responded dismissively, making no effort to be helpful. Marcus kept his calm and continued handling the business with as much composure as possible. Though he too was frustrated by Amanda's treatment, he knew that escalating the situation wouldn't help. He had grown accustomed to dealing with discriminatory behavior, and today was no different. He just wanted to finish and leave the bank, moving on with his life. Amanda, in her mind, was completely unaware of the impact of her behavior. To her, Marcus and Alicia were just unimportant customers, people she didn't need to spend time or effort on. She believed they didn't deserve the attention she gave to other clients, those she deemed more valuable. She didn't think twice as she quickly completed the transaction, not noticing the clear frustration and disappointment on Alicia's face. But Amanda's dismissive attitude would soon lead to consequences she never expected. After hastily wrapping up the transaction, Amanda shoved the paperwork toward Marcus and Alicia indifferently. She didn't look them in the eye, nor did she bother to explain the transaction details. "Everything's done. You can head over to the teller to pay the transaction fee," she said coldly and unprofessionally, without so much as a smile or a thank you. Alicia sat for a moment, trying to control the rising anger within her. She knew she couldn't let the situation spiral out of control, but Amanda's attitude was difficult to endure. "Amanda, could you double-check this for us?" Alicia asked, her voice calm but firm. "I just want to make sure everything has been done according to the original agreement." Amanda frowned slightly, irritation flashing across her face. She paused for a moment, glancing briefly at Marcus and Alicia, then sighed reluctantly. "Everything is correct. There's nothing to worry about," she responded curtly, eager to finish so she could return to the customers she considered more important. Marcus glanced at Alicia, then gently placed a reassuring hand on his wife's arm. "We're done here. There's no need to make a scene. Let's just finish and leave," he said with quiet calm, though the disappointment in his eyes was clear. Marcus knew Alicia was deeply upset, and he too felt the sting of unfairness in how they had been treated, but he didn't want to turn this into an unnecessary confrontation. Alicia could do nothing but sit quietly and watch Amanda walk away without a word of apology or concern for them. Amanda turned her back indifferently and immediately focused on another group of white customers, her face lighting up with a smile, her voice warmer. She stood happily chatting with them, not sparing a thought for Marcus and Alicia, as if they had never existed. Alicia felt her blood boil. She looked over at the other customers, receiving the warm and attentive service she and Marcus had been denied. Everything was clear to her now. Amanda had been biased against them from the moment they walked into the bank. But as angry as she was, Alicia knew that causing a scene now would only make things worse. "This is unbelievable," Alicia muttered under her breath. Marcus stood up, gently reminding Alicia, "We're done here, let's go. Don't let this ruin our day." He took his wife's hand and they walked away from the transaction area. As they approached the teller to finalize the payment, Marcus and Alicia continued to notice the stark differences in how the staff treated them compared to other customers. At the teller, a young female employee didn't greet them or smile. The entire process was cold and mechanical. Alicia noticed the dissatisfaction clearly, but Marcus kept calm, eager to finish quickly so they could leave the bank. Meanwhile, Amanda remained busy with her priority customers. She smiled and took her time to carefully advise them on transaction options, a stark contrast to the way she had treated Marcus and Alicia. Deep down, Amanda always felt that these customers deserved her attention because they often brought in high value transactions and fit the image she believed the bank wanted to project, one of elegance and luxury. As Marcus and Alicia exited the bank, Alicia couldn't hold back her feelings any longer. "I can't believe we were treated like that," she said quietly, the disappointment evident in her voice. "Amanda's attitude was terrible, and I'm not imagining it. She discriminated against us from start to finish." Marcus sighed, though he too was frustrated. He knew there was no use in getting angry. "I know, Alicia, but we're done here. Don't let it ruin the rest of the day." Alicia remained silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. "I know, but it still makes me uncomfortable. They need to change the way they treat their customers." But just as the two were about to step out the door, everything suddenly changed. A loud gunshot echoed from the front of the bank. Panic screams filled the air. Marcus and Alicia immediately turned to see a disheveled man, his hair wild and his eyes filled with rage, brandishing a gun as he stormed into the bank. He fired a shot into the ceiling, causing everyone to immediately crouch down in search of cover. Amanda, standing near the transaction counter, froze when she heard the shot. She turned and saw the man walking directly toward her, gun in hand. Her face turned pale, her whole body trembling with fear. He came closer, his eyes filled with menace. "All of you, stay still!" the man shouted, his voice echoing throughout the bank, sending everyone scrambling to hide behind the transaction desk. He continued to advance toward Amanda, the gun now pointed directly at her. The entire bank was filled with tense silence, broken only by Amanda's ragged breathing and the soft sounds of people trying to hide. She couldn't believe what was happening. All of her arrogance and coldness vanished. In that moment, Amanda could only think of one thing. She wanted to live. The man stepped closer, his wild eyes locked on Amanda. "Don't move!" he barked, his voice filled with desperation. Everyone in the bank held their breath, waiting for something terrible to happen at any moment. Marcus and Alicia, hiding behind a nearby desk, exchanged worried glances. They knew the situation could become much more dangerous. And despite the unjust and discriminatory treatment they had just experienced, both of them knew they couldn't stand by and do nothing. Marcus and Alicia tried to stay calm, their eyes fixed on the man pointing the gun at Amanda. The air in the bank was thick with tension, each second feeling like an eternity. Amanda, who had once been so proud and cold, now stood frozen, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Her eyes locked onto the gun pointed at her, her heart pounding in fear. She could do nothing but stand still, completely helpless. The man, Brian, continued yelling, ordering everyone in the bank to stay down and not move. "Everyone stay quiet!" he screamed, his voice filled with desperation and anger. "I just need money. Stay still if you don't want to get hurt." Marcus leaned toward Alicia, whispering cautiously, "We need to find a way to get out of here without drawing his attention." Alicia looked around, searching for a safe escape but couldn't find any clear path. They were too close to the center of the chaos, just a few meters from Brian and Amanda. She knew that if they moved at the wrong time, things could get much worse. Brian moved nervously around the counter, his hands shaking as he pointed the gun at Amanda, threatening to shoot if she didn't follow his orders. "Hurry up! Open the safe! I've got nothing to lose!" he shouted, his eyes wild. Amanda, her hands trembling, tried to stay calm as she followed his orders, but her mind felt frozen. She couldn't think clearly, the fear consuming her. Sweat started to roll down her forehead as she shakily tried to find the code to the safe. Each second passed like an eternity, the tension in the bank building as everyone stayed hidden, trying not to attract attention. Soft cries and whispers filled the air, all laced with panic and fear. Alicia glanced over at Marcus, her face serious. "What do you think we can do?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with concern. Marcus gently squeezed her hand, trying to keep her calm. "We have to wait for the right moment. If we move too soon, he might hurt more people. But I'm not going to let him hurt anyone else." Brian continued shouting, becoming more unhinged. "Hurry up! Didn't you hear me?" He slammed his hand down on the counter, knocking over several items around him. Amanda was stunned by his outburst. her heart racing so fast she could hear every beat in her ears. She fumbled with the safe, her hands too shaky to open it. "I'm trying. Please don't hurt me," she cried, tears streaming down her pale face. Amid the chaos, Marcus noticed Brian's condition deteriorating. His eyes were becoming unfocused, as if he was getting lost in his own chaotic emotions. Marcus knew that if no one intervened, things could spiral out of control. He whispered to Alicia, "We have to stay calm, but I think we need to act before this situation gets any worse. He could hurt anyone." Alicia nodded slightly, understanding what Marcus was planning. Even though they had been mistreated throughout their time at the bank, that no longer mattered. They couldn't stand by and watch someone else be harmed, even if that person was Amanda. As Brian continued to pressure Amanda, demanding she open the safe, Marcus and Alicia began mentally preparing to act. They knew they had to wait for the right moment, a brief instant when Brian was distracted enough for them to intervene and possibly disarm him. The entire bank was filled with an oppressive silence, everyone waiting for something to happen, something to shift the momentum of this dangerous situation. Brian, holding the lives of many in his hands, was growing more unstable. His emotions were spiraling out of control, causing more fear among the hostages. And in that moment, Marcus and Alicia prepared to make their move, not just to save Amanda, but to save everyone in the bank. The bank now fell silent, with only the heavy breaths of Marcus, Alicia, and Brian filling the air. They had done it. They had stopped a potential disaster from unfolding. Marcus and Alicia remained firmly holding Brian on the floor, his body writhing in futile resistance as the panic in his eyes was gradually replaced by helplessness. His labored breathing echoed through the now quiet space, punctuated by the soft sobs and murmurs of the witnesses. Brian, who moments earlier had been desperate and enraged, was now just a weakened figure, subdued by Marcus, no longer a threat. Amanda, still slumped behind the counter, her eyes wide with terror, struggled to process the unfolding scene as the situation finally settled. She couldn't move, her limbs frozen by the sheer fear of what had just transpired. Her body trembled uncontrollably, tears streaming down her pale face. All the arrogance and bias she had carried just moments before had evaporated, replaced by the raw, primal fear of having faced death so closely. The other customers in the bank began to breathe sighs of relief, slowly emerging from their hiding spots, checking if it was truly safe. Some bent down to console their loved ones, while others stared in disbelief at Marcus and Alicia, struggling to comprehend the bravery they had just witnessed. Marcus and Alicia rose, still holding Brian firmly, who had now given up all resistance. Marcus, maintaining his calm demeanor, scanned the room, his eyes landing on Amanda. She looked like a small, terrified bird trapped in a cage, shaking uncontrollably, clutching her chest. A moment of silence passed. Then Marcus turned to Alicia. "We need to call the police," he said, his voice steady but firm. Alicia nodded, immediately pulling out her phone and dialing to alert the authorities and request an ambulance. Brian lay on the floor, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. It seemed like all his strength had been drained, leaving him powerless and defeated. At that moment, he was no longer the menacing figure threatening lives, but a man who had been beaten down by life, a lost soul filled with desperation. Amanda tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't obey her mind's command. She nearly collapsed, but luckily, one of the nearby customers rushed to her side, helping her sit down on a chair. Her breathing came in short gasps as she kept glancing toward Marcus and Alicia, the very people she had once scorned, now the ones who had saved her life. Minutes later, the wailing sirens of police cars and ambulances could be heard approaching from a distance. The sound broke the suffocating silence in the bank, bringing a sense of relief that everything was finally over, that safety had been restored. The bank doors swung open, and a team of armed officers swiftly entered, securing the scene. "Hands up!" one of the officers shouted, his gun raised and ready. Marcus slowly raised both hands in the air, showing no fear or resistance. "I'm Marcus, and this is my wife, Alicia. We've subdued the robber. He's no longer a threat," he explained, his voice calm and clear. The police quickly approached, arrested Brian, handcuffed him, and pulled him off the floor. He didn't resist, his eyes still vacant, as if he had given up on everything. The room seemed to collectively sigh in relief as the danger was completely neutralized. While the police checked the scene and questioned the witnesses, paramedics rushed to Amanda's side. She was still sitting in her chair, trembling, clutching her chest as if trying to keep her heart from bursting out. The paramedics tried to reassure her, checking her vital signs and soothing her panic. Marcus and Alicia stood quietly in a corner, watching the chaos gradually calm down. They both felt the exhaustion in their bodies as the adrenaline began to wear off. All eyes in the bank were on them, filled with surprise and gratitude. No one had expected that this couple, who had just been treated unfairly, would be the ones to save everyone in that critical moment. When the police approached Marcus and Alicia for their statements, they recounted the event calmly. One officer, after hearing their story, nodded respectfully. "Thank you both. You saved many lives today," he said, his voice filled with appreciation. Once everything was under control and Brian was taken away, Amanda, now somewhat calmer, slowly stood up. She looked toward Marcus and Alicia, her eyes full of emotion. She didn't know where to begin expressing her gratitude. A complex mix of emotions surged within her: shame, guilt, and thankfulness. Taking slow steps toward Marcus and Alicia, Amanda tearfully said, Thank you. I don't know what to say. I don't deserve your help after everything I did." Marcus looked at her, his eyes free of judgment. He simply nodded, his gaze gentle yet firm. "No one deserves to die in a situation like this. We just did what needed to be done." Alicia nodded as well, though her eyes held a deep, contemplative expression. She didn't need to say much. Their actions had already spoken volumes. The discrimination and the hurt they had endured throughout the transaction now seemed insignificant in the face of life and death. Amanda nodded silently, her eyes welling up with tears. She didn't know if she could make amends for what she had done, but she knew her life would never be the same. Her prejudices and arrogance had shattered in that moment of facing death, and the ones who had saved her were the very people she had once looked down upon. As Amanda grappled with her turbulent emotions, paramedics quickly approached and attended to her. They took her blood pressure, asked about her health, and gently placed her on a stretcher to ensure she hadn't sustained any severe physical injuries from the psychological shock. Amanda let them do their work, but inside she was overwhelmed with a sense of disorientation and insecurity. Marcus and Alicia stood quietly, observing, silently tracking every moment. Marcus sighed with relief when he saw that Amanda was being cared for safely. Though he had become accustomed to dangerous situations in life, this time felt different. He could feel the mental exhaustion more than the physical fatigue. Facing the potential death of another person, especially someone who had treated him and his wife unfairly just minutes before, wasn't easy to process. Alicia, also silently standing beside her husband, kept her eyes fixed on Amanda. Forgiveness and compassion were the choices she and Marcus had made, but that didn't mean her emotions weren't stirred. Alicia had witnessed the injustices they had endured that morning, from Amanda's coldness to her dismissive attitude during the transaction. But in that moment of danger, those judgments no longer mattered. At that moment, Amanda wasn't just a discriminatory bank employee. She was a person in need of saving. As the ambulance began to roll away, taking Amanda to the hospital for further checks, her eyes met Marcus and Alicia's once more. She said nothing, only looking at them with deep gratitude, a gaze filled with thousands of unspoken words. She had changed, that much was clear, and Marcus could sense it. He gave her a slight nod, saying nothing more. A while later, when the bank had settled down, Marcus and Alicia were invited by the police to give formal statements. They recounted the details, from when Brian stormed into the bank and demanded everyone get down, to the moment they decided to act to save Amanda and everyone around them. The officers listened attentively and took thorough notes. One officer, after recording everything, turned to Marcus and Alicia with admiration. "You both acted very bravely," he said. "If it weren't for you, the situation could have turned out very differently. You saved many lives today." Marcus nodded slightly, feeling the weariness slowly creeping into his body. He never sought praise or recognition. To him, the action was natural, the right thing to do in a moment of crisis. "We just did what needed to be done," he replied, his voice calm but heavy. After the police finished their documentation, Marcus and Alicia quietly left the bank. They didn't say anything more. Outside, the afternoon sunlight gently shone down, bringing a sense of peace after the storm. Marcus let out a long breath, savoring the rare calm after the tense hours they had just endured. As they walked down the sidewalk, Alicia suddenly stopped and turned to look at her husband. "Do you think she'll change?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. She was still pondering Amanda, wondering if the terrible event would truly change how she viewed life and treated others. Marcus looked into Alicia's eyes, thinking for a moment. "I don't know for sure," he replied, his eyes reflecting caution. "But I believe that when faced with death, people realize what truly matters. Amanda went through that, and I don't think she'll ever be the same again." Alicia smiled softly, nodding. She knew her husband was right. Although Amanda had made mistakes, everyone deserved a chance to change. And today, Marcus and Alicia had not only saved her life, but also given her a chance to make amends and become a better person. Marcus and Alicia continued walking, their figures slowly disappearing into the afternoon sun, carrying with them a sense of peace and quiet. They both knew that through this event, not only Amanda, but they too had learned something about forgiveness, compassion, and the value of life. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Amanda lay quietly on her bed, staring up at the ceiling with a mind in turmoil. The events of the previous day remained vividly clear in her memory. The fear, the sense of being threatened, and the unexpected rescue by the very people she had judged and mistreated. She knew her life would never be the same from that moment on. The hospital room felt cold, with bright white lights illuminating the ceiling. Amanda lay there, but her mind was far from at ease. The steady hum of the medical machines filled the room, but her thoughts were chaotic, swirling with memories of the horrifying event. The image of Marcus and Alicia, those she had once treated with cold indifference and disdain, lingered in her mind. A deep sense of shame and guilt welled up within her. Amanda couldn't believe that the people she had mistreated were the ones who had saved her in her most vulnerable moment. Daylight streamed through the window, but for Amanda, everything still seemed bleak and unclear. She couldn't stop thinking about how she had treated Marcus and Alicia, the discrimination, the disdain, the judgments she had cast based on their appearance. Now, after facing death and being saved by them, Amanda realized how wrong she had been. What she had experienced wasn't just the terror of being threatened, but also a profound awakening to kindness, fairness, and compassion, which she had overlooked for so long. A soft knock on the door interrupted Amanda's thoughts. She turned her head and saw a nurse enter to check her vital signs. "Are you feeling better?" the nurse asked, her voice gentle but full of concern. Amanda nodded weakly, though the heaviness in her heart remained. She knew she couldn't simply return to normal after the horrific event. "I'm still thinking about everything," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Everything happened so fast and I can't stop thinking about it." The nurse placed a comforting hand on Amanda's shoulder. "You made it through, and that's what matters most. Sometimes, experiences like this make us reflect more on life, but the important thing is that you're safe." After the nurse left, Amanda sank back into her thoughts. She knew that confronting her emotions and what she had been through was necessary. She couldn't just brush everything aside and continue living, as she had before. She needed to face the truth that she had been living in prejudice and unjust judgment for far too long. Another knock on the door echoed, but this time, it was a police officer coming to take her statement. Amanda sat up slowly, her heart rate picking up slightly as she thought about recounting the terrifying moments. The officer entered holding a notepad and looked at her with a sympathetic gaze. "We need to know more about what happened yesterday. Can you provide a detailed account for us?" he asked, his voice gentle but carrying the seriousness of his duty. Amanda took a deep breath and began to recount the events. From the moment Brian entered the bank and threatened everyone, to how Marcus and Alicia had bravely stepped in to save her. As she spoke, the images came alive, vividly replaying in her mind. The fear she felt when the gun was pointed at her, the shouting, and then Marcus and Alicia's courage as they faced danger to save her. At times, Amanda's voice faltered, and she felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she remembered the moment when her life nearly ended. The officer listened attentively, taking detailed notes as Amanda recounted every detail. When she finished, he nodded and said empathetically, "Those two were very brave. They didn't just save you, but they prevented a tragedy from happening to others in the bank as well." Amanda could only nod in silence. She understood that, beyond saving her life, Marcus and Alicia had helped her see the error of her ways and given her a chance to change. After the officer left, the room returned to its unusual stillness. Amanda lay back down, staring at the ceiling, and began to think more deeply about her future. She couldn't continue living as she had before. What had happened wasn't just a brush with death. It was an awakening. In the following days, Amanda remained in the hospital for further observation, but a sense of determination had taken root within her. She was going to change, not just for Marcus and Alicia, but for herself. She had learned that fairness and compassion were the most important things in life. Every workday at the bank from then on, she would strive to eliminate the prejudices and unfair judgments she once harbored. Discharge day came faster than Amanda had expected. As she left the hospital, she felt a lightness in her heart, but also a sense of responsibility. She walked slowly down the street toward her home, still feeling the fatigue weighing on her body, but her mind was filled with resolve. Amanda knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it and make up for her mistakes. A few days later, Amanda returned to the bank to resume her job. The bank's atmosphere was as busy as ever, but for Amanda, everything had changed. She was no longer the same woman, filled with prejudices and quick judgments of others. Every customer who entered the bank was now treated with respect and genuine care. Amanda understood that everyone had value, and she no longer had the right to judge anyone based solely on their appearance. One morning, while she was working, Amanda suddenly heard familiar footsteps. She looked up and saw Marcus and Alicia walking into the bank once again. Her heart skipped a beat, but this time, it wasn't out of fear or anxiety. It was because she knew this was her chance to make amends and show that she had truly changed. Amanda took a deep breath, approached the counter, and with a sincere smile greeted them. "Hello. Thank you for coming back. How can I assist you today?" Marcus and Alicia looked at Amanda, a hint of surprise flashing across their faces. The last time they had seen her, her attitude had been completely different, cold and unwelcoming. But this time, they could see the sincerity in her eyes and hear it in her voice. Amanda had changed. The arrogance and prejudice she had once displayed were gone, replaced with respect and genuine care. Marcus gave a slight smile, his eyes reflecting understanding. "We're just here to check our account," he said casually, not bringing up the events of the past. Amanda led them to one of the best counters, a stark contrast to the last time when she had intentionally directed them to a less convenient and isolated area. She carefully handled their paperwork, taking her time with an attitude of dedication and professionalism. This time, there was no rush or indifference. Amanda listened to every detail, not missing a single request. Alicia sat quietly, observing Amanda with a probing look, but the suspicion and frustration from before were gone. She could sense the change in Amanda, and that made her feel more at ease. Although there was still a trace of the injustice she had felt from their last encounter, Alicia knew that the woman in front of her was trying to make amends. While processing the transactions, Amanda maintained a polite and gentle demeanor, never once showing any sign of haste. When she finished, she smiled and asked, "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" Her voice was not just part of a routine, but a reflection of her genuine concern. Marcus and Alicia exchanged glances. Then Marcus turned back with a slight smile. "No, thank you. Everything's fine," he replied. Amanda nodded, feeling a sense of relief that the transaction had gone smoothly. But she knew there was something more she needed to say. As Marcus and Alicia were about to stand up and leave, she hesitated for a moment, then decided to speak the words that had been weighing on her for so long. "Marcus, Alicia," Amanda began, her voice a little shaky, "I just want to say, I'm truly sorry for how I treated you last time. I know I was wrong, and you didn't deserve to be discriminated against like that." Marcus and Alicia stopped, looking straight at her. Amanda could feel her heart racing, the deep remorse evident in her eyes. "I'm truly grateful that you saved my life, even though I treated you poorly. And I promise, from that moment on, I will never judge anyone by their appearance again. I've really changed." Alicia looked at Amanda for a moment, then gently nodded. "Thank you for saying that," she responded, her voice soft but sincere. "We're also glad you're safe." Marcus smiled lightly and added, "We never expected anything from you other than respect. Thank you for realizing that and for changing. It says a lot about you." Amanda felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest. Her apology had been accepted, and the air between the three of them became lighter and more comfortable. She knew that change wasn't always easy, but she had started this new journey with determination. After saying goodbye to Marcus and Alicia, Amanda returned to her work with a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer the person she had been before, someone who judged customers by their appearance or treated them indifferently. She had learned that fairness and compassion were the qualities she needed to carry with her in every situation. From that day on, Amanda truly changed the way she viewed life and those around her. Every time she welcomed a customer, she remembered the valuable lesson Marcus and Alicia had inadvertently taught her, the lesson of kindness, forgiveness, and the ability to change oneself. That day, as Marcus and Alicia left the bank, they both felt that something had truly changed in Amanda, and that gave them a sense of satisfaction, knowing that somehow they hadn't just saved her life that day, but they had also helped her realize the value of kindness and forgiveness. Sometime later, Amanda continued working at the bank with a completely new attitude. Every day was an opportunity for her to right the wrongs of her past and treat customers with respect, without discrimination or judgment. Her colleagues began to notice the positive change in the way she communicated and served. Amanda was no longer cold or detached as she had once been. She had become a warm, attentive, and sincere person with every customer, regardless of who they were. One morning, while reviewing files, Amanda suddenly remembered the terrifying moments of that day when she had faced death and been unexpectedly saved by Marcus and Alicia. Though some time had passed, the powerful emotions from that event still lingered in her mind, reminding her every day of the change she had committed to. She understood that she had been given a second chance in life, a chance to live better, with more compassion. On a busy day at the bank, Amanda saw the door open, and once again, Marcus and Alicia stepped inside. This time, they weren't there to conduct a transaction. They had just dropped by chance. She smiled, a smile that reflected not only gratitude, but also deep respect for them. Marcus and Alicia, upon seeing Amanda, immediately noticed the difference in her eyes and demeanor. There were no traces of the arrogance or coldness they had encountered the first time. Instead, there was a warm and sincere Amanda. Alicia approached the counter, offering a gentle smile. "We were just passing by and decided to stop in. How's everything going?" she asked. Amanda nodded, responding with confidence but humility. "Everything's going well, thank you. Thanks to both of you, I've realized a lot of important things in life." Marcus smiled, extending his hand to shake Amanda's. "We're glad you've changed. That's what really matters." Amanda gripped Marcus's hand, her heart filled with a sense of peace and pride. She hadn't just overcome her fear in that life-threatening moment, but she had also learned how to become a better person. Redemption didn't come through words alone, but through actions and how she lived each day since that event. The three of them stood there for a moment, the silence between them, no longer a burden, but an understanding. No more words were needed. Marcus and Alicia knew that Amanda had truly changed, and Amanda knew she had found the right path. As Marcus and Alicia left, Amanda watched them go with a deep sense of contentment. Her life had entered a new chapter, a chapter of forgiveness, kindness, and compassion. And although the journey had just begun, she knew she would never return to the person she once was. La Lumere, the bank where everything began, was no longer just a place of work. It was now a symbol of change and redemption for one person. Amanda had found not only forgiveness from others, but also from herself. The story of Amanda, Marcus, and Alicia offers deep lessons about kindness, forgiveness, and the human capacity for change. From a bank employee filled with prejudice and judgment, Amanda came to realize the true value of respecting others, regardless of their background or appearance. Marcus and Alicia's forgiveness gave her a second chance to become a better person and live a more meaningful life. Life is never without mistakes and failures, but the most important thing is knowing how to stand up, make amends, and improve ourselves. Through this story, we learn that kindness and forgiveness don't just change the lives of others, they can also change us. If you love stories about change, redemption, and valuable life lessons, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on more inspiring stories. Let's spread positivity together and build a community that loves, shares, and promotes good.